All right, you are still watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. As a matter of fact, we're going to take a background as a prompt for our conversation this morning.
It has been almost 2 years since the COVID-19 pandemic took the world by storm, and its effects are still biting. As part of the global community, Nigeria's economy also nosedived, leading to reduced productivity, trade disruption, loss of revenues, among other effects. This has led the government to initiate several policies on revenue generation, targeting new investment windows and economic growth towards cushioning the effects on the economy. Consequently, the present administration, in its consistent tradition, particularly in the last 2 years of having finance bills submitted annually to the legislature, President Muhammadu Buhari transmitted the Finance Bill 2021 to the National Assembly for consideration and passage. The bill proposes changes and updates to some of the provisions of the following pieces of legislation: Capital Gains Tax Act, Company Income Tax Act, Personal Income Tax Act, Tertiary Education Trust Fund Act, among others. Some experts note that the various amendments proposed by the Finance Bill 2021 further reiterates government's commitment to align the Nigerian tax system with global best practices and ensure the ease of doing business in Nigeria. They insist that these amendments will clarify some ambiguities and contradictions observed in the Finance Acts of 2019 and 2020, as well as other issues that were not previously addressed. Recall that while the Finance Act 2020, which was signed into law by the President on 31st December 2020, addressed the overall tax reforms, financial management, and public revenue strategies, the Finance Bill 2021 aims to support the implementation of the 2022 federal budget by proposing key reforms to specific taxation, customs, excise, fiscal, and other relevant laws. Some key proposals in the bill include the expansion of the Federal Inland Revenue Service powers to assess the income tax of companies that have significant economic presence in Nigeria. As Nigerians await further deliberations, eventual passage and signing of the Finance Bill 2021 into law, what impact will it have on the economy and, most importantly, on ordinary Nigerians? Guests on the program will speak to the issues shortly.
And joining us in our Abuja studio to discuss the topic is Professor Ken Ife, economic policy analyst. We thank you for being here this morning.
Thank you for having me.
All right. We also like to welcome here in Abuja studio Ni Akinsiju, a financial and investment analyst. You're also welcome this morning.
Yeah, thank you. It's a privilege.
All right. And joining us from our Kano studio is Professor Yushao Ango, Professor of Finance and Entrepreneurship and Dean, School of Postgraduate Studies, Kaduna State University. Sir, good morning and welcome to our program.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
All right, gentlemen, it's our pleasure to have you with us. All three, of course, are regular analysts of economic and financial matters on Good Morning Nigeria. And today we're looking at Finance Bill 2021. Let's just, for the benefit of our viewers, seek to situate the place of the Finance Bill in the country's appropriation matrix. What does the Finance Bill represent? And of course, every piece of legislation is important. There's no useless piece of legislation, as the saying goes. But why is the Finance Bill such a critical part now of our budgetary cycle? First, Ni.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity. I think it's it has not been a tradition in Nigeria until I think 2019 when we first had the finance bill. But actually, globally, it's the best practice. When you have your appropriation bill go to the lawmaking arm of government, you support it with the financial bill, the finance bill. The finance bill is to provide the ambience, the financial ambience for the proposed appropriation bill, to provide a direction on where the monies will be coming from in the fact of it. So you have estimates in your appropriation bill. You now have specifics, sectors that you are reforming. It's like updating the different revenue acts, in the country. So, for instance, in the 2019 bill, it was about 14 acts that had to do with MDAs relating with revenue generation, or those that also hand or that collect levy. So the tertiary education tax fund, for instance, comes from 0.005% from profits of companies. You straighten that, you look at how it is going to be collected, you look at how it's going to be administered. So it's principally about updating, upgrading financial activities as it affects collection, administration of different MDAs and, of course, different laws as it affects taxation and levies.
All right, Professor Ken, what is your own reading, of the Financial Bill 2021 with regards to tax administration and financial reforms?
Now, for a start, I think I need to give it to this government, because this is the most, as far as I'm concerned, finance bill is the most important achievement of this administration in the area of public finance management. Because even in UK, where I have spent 40 years, every time the budget is coming, all of us will switch on to find out what's the new tax, what's that, everything we want to know. And then businesses will evaluate the impact of, so we know, but it's a living tool that you constantly use to shape and reform and fine-tune the fiscal space. So it's very, very critical. And it is expected in our laws, but it's just that it wasn't being implemented. Now, the second thing, of course, is this particular one that has come on now just brings to mind the ease of doing business. The World Bank ease of doing business. One of the major areas is tax administration, multiple taxation, and all of those they are addressed, very clearly addressed in this. Many people run into difficulty just because they want the tax reform that is so needed, to the inefficiencies needed in the FIRS tax administration is holding back the economy. For example, there are certain things that have to be automatic, but you have to go to tax board to do this every time. And you think it's easy. Businesses start and stop just because they have to wait for a procedure. What you're entitled to, you can't get because you are submitted to a procedure. And I've had these many cases all the time from different businesses. So I can see how it has placed automatic, it pushes automation into many things that could have been hindering the business. So I said that we will discuss that detail, but that fact that automation is coming into FIRS in many areas, flashpoints, means that we're going to have even more revenue. If you look at what Lagos State did, why they are generating a lot of revenue, is the system that has taken over the prejudices of individuals and the discretions of individuals, that you can just go and go to the system, declare your tax, pay your tax, get your receipt. But money rolled 3-4-fold. So I've seen that coming into the thing. And then I also saw a lot of simplification. For example, in mergers and acquisitions, it tells you, normally it will bring in capital gains tax. But it says, okay, look, I will withdraw capital gains tax if Nigerian company is a beneficiary, and if it is demonstrated to be in the interest of better business arrangement and all. So it's benefiting us. So and they remember one of the acts, it corrected the double taxation, which has stopped many big businesses from having headquarters in Nigeria. Because what is it? The big companies, the group, which is where they consolidate, when they move their group and keep it in Dubai, what happens is that their subsidiaries here will be invoicing Dubai, and then the importers, what they're importing, will be invoicing Dubai. So you have transfer pricing issues, and they don't want to stay here with their head office because of double taxation. So that has been eliminated, and that means encouraging these companies to now come and have their headquarters here. And that means more tax revenue. We lose $8.4 billion every year on transfer pricing in this country. Africa loses 84 billion every year on transfer pricing. So there are efficiency issues that are being addressed here, and I hope we'll have time to unpack them.
Okay, back to Niya Kinsiju. Niya, just one point that I would like us to clarify, if possible. I know it's more of a legal point, but earlier when we were introducing today's program, my colleague and I were discussing the issue around the label, Finance Bill 2021, and yet it is meant as an adjunct to the Appropriation Bill 2022. Why is it retrospective? I think this is a question that can be fairly treated, but in addition to that, what do you find unique about the bill itself? Why is it retrospective in labeling? And then what is unique about it?
Yeah, that's well, being retrospective will be purely legal. I'm not a lawyer, but I want to believe that it's given that title perhaps because of the year of introduction to the National Assembly. That's my layman's point of view.
When it's passed.
When it's passed, you know.
So the appropriation bill is 2022. So why don't you label it appropriation bill 2021?
Then you have to delay the implementation until 2022.
Well, is it
you need to have it in place for you to be able to implement it in the appropriation bill.
That's why I say it's legal. Well, what I would do, I would want to take further research. Okay. I was just wondering, because in terms of labeling, what is critical is the commencement date. If it is say if this bill commences on the 1st of January 2022, then it's Finance Bill 2022. The other point that I had raised earlier was to say, okay, these are basically tax issues that are being dealt with in the Finance Bill. For instance, profits or otherwise, company profits and so on and so forth, may not be declared in the year of the appropriation bill itself, when it becomes an act, say 2021. Companies normally will have retrospective to say, in our year of business 2021, this was what happened. And if this was the applicable law, if this is the applicable law to that very year of your business, for which you are now declaring profit, then the provisions of this one will apply. But as I said, I mean, it's just probably without hair splitting. But let's get to the substance of the provisions.
I was coming to
it is the best thing that is happening. In asking this question, we know that all over the world, tax issues are usually contentious. Citizens, that's to say, individual citizens and even corporate citizens, often resist, the Treasury aiming more for their pocket.
Yeah, it's normal, because if you are conducted the business and the government is saying you have to pay 30% of that business tax as your income tax, company income tax, you will contend, But the truth again is that the business of government is managed through taxes, through taxation and levies. So government, as much as possible, try to be efficient in terms of assessing and collecting taxation everywhere in the world. So we are actually just coming up with being serious about assessment and collection. if you don't have a finance bill, for instance, you'll be doing things as they were done in 1950. Before the 2019 first finance bill, there were taxation and levies laws that were as old as 50 years, in Nigeria. So what the finance bills are doing starting 2019 is to actually upgrade and is a continuum in terms of process and reformation, for all the collection of sectors that had to do with taxation, levies, and all that. Right. Now, what is unique about this, to my mind, and I think I have to praise the federal government, is the fact that it's an attempt to organically increase the threshold of tax and levy collections, without increasing the quantum of the percentage itself. So across board now, when you look at all the items, all the sections being reformed, being upgraded, there is no mention of increase in any forms of taxation. So it's there. The VAT remains at 7.5%. Company income tax, class 2 classification of 100 million and above, still remains at 20% and 30% and all that. Now, what I think it's been targeted objectively with this finance bill is to make collection more efficient, and of course also make investment equitable. And why I'm saying more equitable, in addition to what Prof has said, is the issue of unit trust. I am an investor. I advise people on what to invest in. I know that so many people have been retreating from unit trust, mutual funds, and those other collective forms of investment, because they are also taxed after withholding tax would have been charged on it. And it had been the advocacy of some of us that this should stop. Now that the finance bill has acknowledged it, and it's saying that unit trust would recognize withholding tax as a final, taxation on it. Now, what that tells you is that more people will now likely invest in trust funds, in mutual funds and all that. Okay. Then, secondly, some of us had always advocated the criminalization of the process of repatriation of company MDA's revenue hand. I think on one of these programs here, we discussed that, where there were concern of chief executives converting revenue hand in their department, agencies and all that, especially government enterprises and all that. Now, the Finance Bill 2021 specifically talks to gross earnings being transferred in bulk to either the federation account or the consolidated revenue fund. Now, and of course, the criminalization of it is that if it's not done as that, it's 5 years. There's a 5 years threat of imprisonment or 5 million naira fine or both. Now that shows that there should be efficiency now. It's no longer about sentiments or explaining away why a chief executive of a company did something. There is a law now that applies to corrupt conversion of money's earned, or revenues earned by enterprises, government enterprises. And then you also, another one that also attracts my attention, it's the equity given to commercial private companies on payment of 0.25% of their earnings on the National Science and Engineering Infrastructure Agency. I hope this will be passed, companies' income are charged 0.25%, as levy for the National Agency for Science and Engineering Infrastructure. Now, that has been turned now to 1% of the federation account. Why this is beautiful is that the more you charge the earnings of commercial operating companies, it becomes a burden on shareholders too. So you can start counting how many of these levies, the third fund, the other. We did a calculation, and about 5%, of such charges are levied on earnings by by companies, by qualified companies. Now, if you had that to the main company income tax, what you are doing is that you are reducing earnings that are available to be shared by shareholders, and it's not good for business. When you have this kind of relief, and it's a kind of relief, it attracts more investment in the business sector, in the manufacturing sector, in the operational sectors, and all that. So I think in a good way, this finance bill is attending to equity and, of course, encouraging investment too.
Professor Khan, if I know you want to key into what he had said, or rather speak to part of the points that he has raised, but you may add this to that. Part of the of what this bill is seeking is to tighten the noose on tax evaders with reforms on tax administration and, of course, the international taxation as well. But does this guarantee tax equity?
You see, I'm glad that Nee pointed out the fact that there wasn't really a rise in the tax base, as we know. It is about domestic resource mobilization. Remember, the government has a program to raise the tax to government revenue, or government revenue to GDP from 6 to 15%. So without increasing the tax burden on the constituencies. If you look at the services, under the trading services, you have mode 1, mode 2, mode 3. You know where you can, is the international you mentioned, he dealt with this. You can be outside the country and offer services to Nigeria. That's one mode. You can come into Nigeria, offer services and bugger off. You don't pay tax, you run away. Then you can now come into the country, establish your business, and then offer services and still be non-resident. So these are it's captured these 3 categories and brought them under taxation. This is very, very important. I mean, this is where you begin to look at issues like the tax of DSTV and all that kind of, so who is where, who is what. And we have a lot of that happening in the country. Then the second one, of course, is the VAT. It has placed automatic, it's increased the penalties. If you don't, let's return 50,000. A day after, it goes up continuously every day. So it forces you to make your return. There are people that will just not pay that VAT. They just hold on. No, they can't. So it's just to make it more efficient. The collection, it's just making the collection more efficient. Bringing more people into the tax net. Those who are on our work, that's what it's doing. It's not implicitly putting more burden on existing things. It's widening the tax base and getting people to be more accountable and punishing them. If you don't have penalties, then people will get away with anything and everything.
All right. Professor Koenig, thank you very much. The lines to Kano, I understand, have been restored. Professor Yushao Ango, if we can see you and hear you, of course, that's where we're now on the right side. I hope you've had the opportunity of listening on what your other co-analysts have indicated with regard to the purpose of the finance bill, what it also seeks to achieve in some of the provisions that we have so far been able to discuss. Just take it off from whichever point of view you may wish at this time.
Thank you very much. I've been able to listen through. Like the 2 other analysts have spoken, I am also of the opinion that the country is on the right course. We are doing the right thing coming up from 2019. Globally, this is the practice everywhere. OECD countries, India, all other countries, developed countries are also using this kind of measure, to streamline the aspects of the budget, so that, and we know that in this country, our major challenge now is a revenue challenge. And like has been mentioned, the interesting thing is that we have not seen in this bill any increase in terms of rates or taxation. What we have seen is what appears to be even a reduction in some areas, but then all attempting to bring in into the net, you know, various aspects or various areas that have not been covered. Now, interesting to this also is consistency in terms of policy made of recent. For example, the policy that came out, you know, trying to ease the various things for businesses are also carried along in this bill. Companies less than 25 million, for example, in income, have a lot of waivers which we were aware of. These are being concretized in this bill. I'm happy also about the aspects about interest on agricultural loans, which were originally only on those who are engaged in processing or something like that. Now bringing them to production companies, I mean, that have financed agricultural production, livestock, and things like that can also have some have that income. That is also encouraging. And then donations made by companies for COVID or any donations along those lines are also brought in, and you know, there is some relief. So what I'm seeing basically is that is a wholesome, you know, trying to ensure that, like Prof said, you know, bringing those that were not covered in the tax regime in, you know, for example, those economic activities, those people who provide services in Nigeria and jet out, like he said, who have a significant presence in Nigeria are now going to be taxed. That, I think, that is what is going to encourage and increase the tax or the revenue content that we're able to receive. So in the whole, I think it's a step in the right direction. I think these measures will assist. And if it continues consistently, we're also likely going to see Nigeria improve on the ease of doing business. The last was in 2019, we were number 131 out of 190 countries. That was the best we have had anyway, but we hope that with increased measures like this, hopefully the ease of doing business will improve in Nigeria, and that will now make us to move up, even in the African continent, even the West African subcontinent, because we are number 8 as it is. We need to be in the forefront. So I think measures like this will assist us, you know, will assist the country to move forward, to move up on the ladder. Thank you.
All right, thank you indeed. And now back to the studio. FIRX actually is the primary agency of the federal government responsible for the administration, assessment, collection, accounting, and enforcement of taxes and levies due to the federal government. The federal government at any of these agencies, except otherwise authorized by the finance minister. I'm just thinking, is this not a huge burden on FIRS to be able to do all of this, you know, given the fact that there are other provisions of this bill that could be they could be assisted by any other agency? Is it a possibility for FIRS to do all this as an agency of federal government?
When they automate, the problem is half solved. But when they don't, you just need to be in the position of a company to see what they go through with FIRS. The life of a company depends on their tax clearance for them to be able to tender year on year on year on businesses. You now go for your account and you have issues with them about clarifying and they will hold you for years. And you can't get tax clearance because they have not agreed your account. And you have so many cases. It's not what I would employ here. Companies are suffering. The earlier you automate all that process, the quicker you let Nigerian private sector free. Second one, if you look at the issue of capital gains tax, we know that Nigeria is an imperfect competitive market. There's no competition here. It's a very, very imperfect market economy. And one of the dynamics of foreign economies that are doing really well is the ability of people to buy your company, take you over, sell your business, move on to the next. It's not happening here. And the part of the reason is how you get cleared get the hurdle of the FIR. So this capital gains tax thing is going to be of great importance, because if you are not innovating in business, it's either you are going to be taken over or you're going to go down the drain, or you are going to merge with a company. So when he says to you, all right, the assets that are going to be subject to the capital gains tax must be in your possession a year, 365 days before the act, and if I'm going to give you capital gains exemption, right, you have to still hold that asset for the next 365 days. This has removed the hurdles for companies to start buying companies over. But can you imagine what happened during the banking during the recapitalization of the banks, when they were to whittle down from 89 banks to 22 banks? It was bloodshed. Companies have to merge, and it was bloodshed. And you know people who took the brunt. Even the CBN governor then, his father was attacked. So there was so many things. But now it's made easy. These things can happen overnight, rather than companies.
Prof, let me.
This automation thing you talked about. This automation thing you talked about. Are you saying that FIRS should have access to all companies' transactions to be able to determine what is taxable and what is not taxable? How would automation now assist FIRS or the companies?
No, the things, I just want to give you one example. I have seen a case where a government department has issued a withholding tax. And then you now took your thing in your accounts and went to SIR, and they refused. They said they didn't see it in their portal. I said, but this is a receipt from the company, from the government agency, and this has happened to me. I should have, they refused. I said, if it didn't appear in your system, this is granted to me by a ministry that has made the deduction from me, and that's the receipt. And for that reason, they will not clear this account for 3-4 years. And that means the business is dead because you can't tender for any contract. This is going on. And I said, I am the problem. If you want me, I give the evidence. So, but I'm a small person. I'm just a small thing compared to millions of experiences people get every day. The thing is that I gave you the example of Lagos State. Lagos State has shown that automation can make a difference in revenue generation. Simple. Let people's discretion, people's use of, all these latitudes you grant to people and their so-called judgment are what is holding us back in a very big way in respect to IRA. Automate these processes. Whatever doesn't need approval from a board or joint board, let it just go. Set the conditions clear enough, and then let automatic approval go. If you've made the requirement, is in. And then, of course, with the law, you can come back. Like in the Lagos State, when you do your own self-assessment, you're actually encouraging people to move from informal to formal. Because they now make their own assessment, what they think they say that they ought to pay. They make the assessment, they paid, they entered into the net. You allow them to do the second year, allow them to do the third year. Then third year, you come and sit down. One officer will sit down with them, say, oh, right, thank you so much for entering the system. You've done that. But we're just checking. There's the same company that has your turnover in the same trade, but their return was 3 times your return. Their profit was 4 times your profit. You see, that by the time you discuss those, and then the system is the system that is telling you this, then they are like, oh, they've cut me out. You get him, you get more money, he's already offended, you know that because he has under-declared and all of that, you're going to change, you'll be a better person. If he ever gets out of your hook, he will start paying you more tax.
I think on the issue of technology, the finance bill, as it were, 2021, acknowledged it. It's not said now just about FIRS technology, what they call proprietary technology, but third-party technology. That is, FIRS will have the power to call on the use of any technology by any company to assess that company, and that it's not just about now having the power to call on. There's also the threat of penalty, for which if the FIRS is denied access to the use of that technology, the company faces the risk of being fined 50,000 in the first instance and 25,000 naira thereafter. So what I'm trying to say essentially is responding to Prof's position that I think there is an acknowledgement of a robust use of technology. And also going beyond that, the issue of self-assessment, this Finance Act, Bill 2, had also acknowledged that it's abandoning, jettisoning the idea of provisional tax rates to self-assessment. So whatever it is that would ease, tax assessments now is being considered by the Finance Bill 2022.
Thank you. Gentlemen, sometimes we have to break these issues down for the benefit of our viewers. So that, those whose pockets are not directly affected will say, oh, this doesn't concern me. But in the long run, of course, you also have an impact from the enforcement of the finance bill when it then becomes an act. Professor Yushao Ango, let's again try to get some of these things into proper context. I understand that the audio is off again. It was a bit unstable a while ago. Professor Yushao Ango, once we have that clearance, we'll come back to you. Capital gains tax. Tax issues are usually very complex. Tax issues are not as straightforward. That's why you have tax experts, tax consultants, whether they are lawyers or accountants or just tax specialists.
Yeah.
So when we are discussing this, sometimes we may be speaking above the heads of some of our viewers. But Professor Ken, if one aspect of the finance bill that has been talked about, I want to keep that in abeyance and just say, look, does the finance bill contain omnibus provisions that could be sometimes challenging to wade through unless you are directly and particularly affected? Because you can see provisions affecting all sectors of the economy. It's a complex piece of legislation from what I see. And are we seeing too much speed, from the members of the nation? It has already passed second reading, and there is a desire to probably get all of these things done before they proceed on their Christmas break. And yeah, the implications will be far-reaching if it becomes a law.
No, I don't think so.
Why?
It's just the size of our challenge. For us to be the lowest tax to GDP ratio in Africa at 6 to 7%, the lowest, by far the lowest, we are 3 times underpowered to the size of our economy in terms of tax to GDP ratio. And then, of course, there's a target to increase it to about 15%. The average is 18% in the continent, 18%. And we are running at 1/3. So we are like a 30-ton truck being driven with Volkswagen engine. That's what it's like. So it is necessary. But then what the comfort is that this is preparing you not to be retrospectively effective for 2019, but can be implemented over 2022. So it's not going to be implemented against 2021. Somebody coming to you and say that this was 2021 bill, so you have to pay for it. No, it takes effect from 2022. So, and then again, there's another opportunity by the end of 2022 to smoothen the rough edges, because the experience of that 1-year implementation will inform. You see, what the minister does is that he has a standing committee that is constantly working on this. So seeing the what is coming in from the field, and then fine tune. And in the same way, you have the assembly working in the same way. So, they've got it right. This administration has got it right in terms of tax, public, public finance management system, and all this accountability. And look at all the other area. Do you know, I went to the Senate subcommittee on finance to attend the FIR, sorry, not the fiscal responsibility bill, say 2007. And I was so impressed how the chairman was beating his hand on his chest that all these MDAs that have not paid money for that and that and that, and once all the MDAs in, not just 22, no, they want everybody in. I was so impressed that the level of consciousness of the assembly pushing to raise government revenue is something that we have not experienced before. But that is the level of enthusiasm and that is the size of the challenge that we need to deal with. So having a finance bill that looks overloaded, we have a year to unpack and another year to amend, because it's a work in progress. They keep smoothing the rough edges, and then, so I'm happy with that.
Overloaded, and that brings
It's not
about
really overloaded.
that brings about the complexity that Kingsley talked about. When you talk about tax issues, it's usually complex. Now, of all this, I mean, as Prof did earlier on, saying, and both of you actually, that government has taken the right steps, with respect to finance bill. We hear that the duties currently performed by the Joint Tax Board as relates to administering the Personal Income Tax Act will now be performed by the Federal Inland Revenue. What does this imply? Is the JTB and FIRS not one and the same in terms of, because implementation will always be a problem?
No, it depends on which of the taxes you are looking at. If it's a personal income tax, it's principally the responsibility of the state internal revenue services. By law, the FIRS perhaps even does not even have control, because you have the FCT internal revenue service now. The FIRS is concerned with funds that goes to the consolidated revenue funds or the federation accounts. So the joint tax board responsibility actually is to integrate all responsibilities of collection of taxes and levies in a symmetric way that you don't double tax. So that board allows a board's view of what is happening across the 36 states, plus the FIRS. So I don't think that may be correct if it is about personal income tax. The FIRS is responsible for company income tax, that goes into the federation account, assessed, and of course, transferred into the company, into the federation account. The states' internal revenue services are responsible, for collection of personal income tax, in their individual and respective states. So I cannot see that working out.
I don't know. Again, probably we'll see more details emerge. Because the question Kieran is asking has to do with the perception that there might be the usurpation of the function of the JTB, that's the Joint Tax Board. Yeah. The Joint Tax Board is normally chaired by the chairman of the FIRS, anyway. But the Joint Tax Board speaks to the federal nature of our tax system. Yeah. Because you recognize the national entity and then the subnational entities. And the Joint Tax Board serves as a clearinghouse. So the question is, it's the FIRS now also taking over or likely to take over the functions of subnational entities? And is this something that the subnational entities would resist? Because don't forget, there is a matter that is ongoing, which relates to VAT collection. Exactly. So, and where states, because the Constitution is very clear, allocation of taxing powers, and so on and so forth. Collection can be a different matter. But if states insist that, look, this is how everybody knows, personal income tax is the business of subnational entities, plus some other matters that, of course, we'll have to deal with. Does this bill that is likely to become an act therefore seek to usurp the role of other members of the Joint Tax Board by saying, look, this is coming over to the FIRS? We're going to have to take a short break now. When we return, our guests will continue with the conversation. But we apologize, the signals to Kano are quite challenging at the moment. We do hope...
All right, thanks for staying with us on this edition of Good Morning Nigeria, where we're looking at a finance bill. I want to ask Professor Kenny for this, because we discussed that earlier on, before this program, commenced. The Finance Bill 2021 has made it mandatory for commercial banks to demand tax identification numbers from anyone who wishes to open an account. And some have argued that what about some persons who are not yet working and who may like to have an account in any bank? And one would also like to ask, of what relevance, is this to the the finance bill? Of what relevance is it in terms of tax collection and tax administration?
Well, I'm not sure that would apply to opening savings accounts, because savings accounts you can open for your child and minors, 2 years old. I'm not sure that would apply to that, but it may well apply to current accounts. And I've just started by discussing the issue about international dimension of our tax, where we are now targeting those non-residents and all of that could be. So that's one of the things. But secondly, the fact that you are registered for something doesn't really mean that you will be required to pay tax when you are not eligible to pay tax. Tax is paid on income, and in the country, tax is paid on profits declared by companies operating in your country. So it's like registering for VAT. You can register for VAT and you're not trading. You're not making anything. So you keep having nil account. That doesn't mean that you must be forced to pay what you have not.
But what is the relevance of opening something that you will not activate? I mean, is there any effort to say, what is the relevance of this? How does it, what are the gains in doing so? For instance, a student who open an account, you have a TIN number. For what purpose?
Well, so long as you are a student, it will be nil until such a time when you start earning money. Okay. But I know what the government is heading to. It's just like saying you need to have a national insurance number, national NIM, and all that stuff, and then BVN if you have an account. Now, BVN allows them to achieve many things. Can you imagine if you didn't have BVN, 4 million farmers that got anchor borrowers loan without collateral could never have happened. It could never have happened. So sometimes there's a mileage.
How many of those farmers are repaying now?
That's a different matter. Those who have got it have farmed 3 million hectares. And rice, we don't have to depend on so much importation of rice. We are now approaching sufficiency. So things have changed. The fact that there are some delinquent farmers does not make a case for stopping what has become a blessing to Nigeria, a transformation of our agricultural production system to a commercial agriculture in an outgrower format. So it is a good thing for this country. What happens is this: you keep going. I've advised EBN, increase this to 10 million farmers, and we will dwarf the non-payers. We'll dwarf them and come back to them with GSI. GSI is a global standing instruction where the bank can sweep your account in any bank you have the money.
Yeah,
and whoever guaranteed you, not a financial guarantee, will be swept. His account will be swept as well. So the judgment day will come for those who are not paying, but that shouldn't stop them from expanding this to other states in the south, to other value chains, so that we can stop this poverty that is caused by food insecurity in the country.
Professor Kenife, thank you. Let's come back to this other provision in the Finance Bill 2021, as it is so-called. It says mandatory payment of gross revenue collected by federal ministries, departments, and agencies to the Federation account of CRF, as the case may be, except otherwise authorized by law. And there's also a penalty clause. Any officer who violates this will be liable to 5 years imprisonment or a fine of 5 million naira or both. Mandatory payment of gross revenue. Now, I'm wondering, can we try to elucidate the wisdom behind this provision against the backdrop of the experience of a number of MDAs? When they say gross revenue, how do you run your business?
That one is tough.
How do you run your business? Does it mean that when you get into the consolidated revenue, you want to incur any business, you will also be tapping into the consolidated revenue? Who has access to the consolidated revenue fund of the federal government? And when you also say that in the past, I don't know whether that is still obtaining, that the MDAs could retain about 25% or so.
I was going to come to that.
25%, a number of MDAs were grumbling that because it was frustrating their operations. And now you are having this one saying, look, all gross revenue pay into a federation account or CRF, that's the Consolidated Revenue Fund of the federal government, because each state also has its own. How is this going to either hamper or accelerate businesses?
No, let me first of all, there are two categories: the scheduled corporations and the unscheduled corporations. You know, you have these 122 scheduled corporations, which are ab initio expected to be profit, making and revenue generating and profit making. And then there's now, should we clump them all together? The second one, according to the Fiscal Responsibility Act 2007, is that they are supposed to use the operating surplus and pay 80% of their operating surplus. So they calculate, and every quarter they remit 80% of that operating surplus and keep the other 20% in an account where they use and all that. But where they fail, then the second one kicks in. We are going to be taking down 25% of your money at source. So as that gross revenue is coming, they take 25% as source, and then you can go and sort yourself out with the other and still do us an account, and we reconcile at the end of the year. Now, but what we are now saying is a third one. And I'm not very sure whether that is related, is going to unscheduled corporations or scheduled corporations, because the scheduled corporations are expected to be running as business. And if you clamp all their money into the thing, it might as well it's a death sentence to them.
I think there still needs for some light on this, really. But again, when you also consider the fact that there is a serious effort to place all these revenue-generating agencies into the budget baskets from day one. And I think for the first time you have about more than 80 such agencies in the 2022 budget. So once these are captured in the budget, it suggests that they would be collecting whatever they need, for their operations from the CRF, more or less. So I think the first thing is that the government had done the right thing by capturing all these scheduled and unscheduled agencies in the budget. So from the one, you know what you are spending for recurrent and capital, and you know when this will be disbursed, and of course, cash backed for the agencies. I think it is appropriate that the gross earnings should be swept into the federation accounts as required, or the CRF account. We have seen how these have been, even 80% transfer to the CRF and the federation account have been abused, because mostly you've had so much, what I call it, coloring of accounts. Such, even I think the last hearing was that the National Assembly members were saying even the 20% retained, they were going to reduce it, to like 5%. So the important thing is to have this thing budgeted for. You know what you are spending for the year. You know what your earnings will be for the year. When your earnings come, you sweep into the federation account or the CRF as it is.
But then how do you run your business? Professor Kenny says, look,
I can only agree to this, that this can apply to unscheduled corporations where government is funding their entire budget 100%. So if you have made a budget and government is funding it 100%, then what business do you have with tampering with the revenue? So the revenue can go to the consolidated revenue account. But if you are, I'll give an example, FAN. FAN pays 100% for its services. It doesn't take a penny from federal government. So, and it is maintaining salaries, maintaining the pensions, paying everything payable.
Maintaining the airports.
Yeah, maintaining the airports. And then with contracts for all these and concessions and all of that. And 100% revenue generating. So all you can do with the likes of FAN is make sure that they are generating that 80% according to the operating surplus And where they fail, you now clamp down and take that 25 as source, which is actually what has happened now. But to take it any further is just to kill the business.
Now,
Okay.
gentlemen, as we are about rounding off this edition of the program, many have said that there's speed with which the National Assembly, this finance bill is being considered. Would you say that there's a thorough oversight and attention to detail to avoid implementation difficulties when eventually the bill becomes an act?
Well, what I'll say to you is this. I cannot see anything in any finance bill that will override constitutional provision. So if there is any material inconsistency with the provisions of the Constitution, the governors are there to go to court, and some other people who are affected will go to court because the Constitution is paramount. But as to the essence of having this bill to deal with this level of challenge that we have in this economy, we have to raise revenue. This country is going to collapse. We have to raise revenue. You look at the debt sustainability
But the
questions.
corollary to that, as has also been argued, is not just raising revenue, but also cutting the cost of governance.
Because we're raising the
Of course,
revenue
that is
from
part of it. It is
among
implied.
Nigerians as well.
It's also implied. You are cutting the cost of governance by introducing computer systems that will remove the inequalities and the inefficiencies in the administration of our taxation system.
There are costs of governance that are not even got much to do with taxation. Like the running of National Assembly alone, the money that you use in running National Assembly can run 3 states in this country.
Okay,
But the inefficiencies
Gentlemen, we had apologized to our viewers for the loss of our connection to our Kano Network Center, where Professor Yushua Ango has been with us. He only made one pitch earlier. Now, we've been able to reach him this time via Zoom, just bypassing the problematic connection. Professor Yushua Ango, if you are right there, but if you can hear us, well, thanks. It's been a fairly challenging day, but let's get your take on the number of these issues that have come up: mandatory payment of gross revenue by MDAs and so on and so forth. And lastly, one of the points that we were just talking about relates to what to do with asphyxiating the MDAs or otherwise.
Well, I agree totally. That certainly it is unadvisable. It's something desirable that the MDAs who are making a lot of money should remit that money to the federation account. I think the absence of that has the negative aspect of that is much more problematic. I think also, of course, it will make it difficult for some of them to operate, but then let us reach the bridge, then we cross it. I think that is my opinion. I want to say, because I now have this opportunity, that I'm also happy about the fact that there is provision in the proposed bill, for taking care of this issue of unclaimed dividends, that are there. Based on the bill, if it is approved, it means any unclaimed dividend that has lasted for 3 years will move into an account called Unclaimed Trust Fund, which I think is a desirable thing. And after 12 years, that money will move into the federation account. Given the circumstances, given the challenges, and given the time left, I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to contribute. Thank you.
Prof, we really appreciate it that at least we try to get an alternative to your connection to us. We know, of course, you're a regular guest on Good Morning Nigeria, and we'll return to this subject sometime going forward. Professor Yushua Ango, big delight with you for a limited time on Good Morning Nigeria today. Thank you. Gentlemen, in the studios, very quickly. Now, the Finance Bill 2021 also seeks to amend the Fiscal Responsibility Act to enable government borrow, quote, for critical reforms of significant national impact. Currently, government at all tiers are only empowered to borrow for capital expenditure and human development.
Seriously, I don't understand that. Seriously.
The law, the Fiscal Responsibility Act 2008, has been very explicit on the reason for borrowing. It says it has to be capital expenditure or human resource development, which means education and health, or maybe employment. Okay.
Well,
And actually goes to a particular section to say that any financial institution that gives money on any condition other than this is illegal. Says it illegal. And I think I support that. I'm not sure about amending those because you cannot allow frivolous expenses to become subject to borrowing, external borrowing, or even domestic borrowing, because it's borrowing. It doesn't say domestic or this. And it says on concessionary terms. The law says you have to do a cost-benefit analysis. So even if you want to dream of anything, you have to do a cost-benefit analysis to show that it is viable and sustainable. And then it has to be borrowed on a concessionary long term. So those conditions are not going to be removed.
Well, it's just this addition that I'm confused. This critical reforms.
Critical reforms of significant national impact.
That is very nebulous. I mean,
Absolutely.
and I raised a question with respect to thorough details of what is going to be passed or what will become an act eventually. Because if not, what you have just said, you do understand, it's part of the bill we're talking about. And if it becomes an act, in terms of practicability, it becomes a problem.
No, I can't see any way this is even implementable, because for every word or every phrase in law, it should have an explanatory note.
Very specific.
So if you're talking about critical reforms and all that, and you are also linking it up to cost item, it becomes confusing.
I have read through the proposed amendment to the Fiscal Responsibility Act 2007, and I didn't see this in it.
All right, gentlemen.
Comprehensive review, but I didn't see that.
We are calling it a day at this point, and I want to believe that Kingsley, we may have another cost to return to this, especially when it becomes an act. All right. So at this point, we'd like to appreciate Professor Ken Ife, economic policy analyst. Thank you for coming, and of course, NTA Financial and Investment Analyst.